And it looks like we are live finally, actually. Now that I think about it, we're lucky to be live right now. I'm having some internet issues, guys. So please do bear with us a little bit as we wait for the stream to kind of settle itself out. Breathe just a little bit. Bring in everybody on Facebook. And mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me as per usual is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Now, man, do we have to talk about the Chiefs game? Like, is that something we actually have to dive into? Because I'm tired of talking bad about this team, and it's going to be rough, quite honestly. I'm predicting a blowout, if we're going to be honest here. But it's always good to be here with my buddy Erick and our good friend Scott. What's going on, Erick? How are we doing today?
Doing good. My thing is not do we have to talk about the Chiefs, but can we shift to the draft? Like I've been really doing a lot of work diving into that and barely been watching the upcoming games. So it's kind of why this week we went away from our usual, game preview that we've been doing. I mean, last week was the first week I didn't do my game preview article, just because how many times can you say the same thing over and over again? It's always, oh, the Broncos can do this, but will they? And the answer is no, and it's been consistently no this season, but it's still, they have that potential. It's will they reach it? And so it was getting boring doing that. So instead, we're going to dive into all the juicy little rumors that we're flying about and the information dumps and leaks and everything that involved the Broncos and just get around talking about that.
Yeah, and they're way more fun to discuss right now because, quite honestly, well, the NFL draft would be a lot more fun to discuss. I know you're getting into your scouting reports and everything like that, and doing your finalizing of just your list. What is it, 1,000, 1,200 strong, something like that you've got just for guys that you have to maybe at least take a look at coming up to this season. So I know you're working hard on that, but it's going to be fun to kind of dive into all the rest of this juicy stuff here as well.
Yeah, it starts off about 1,000, 1,200 players or so, and then it gets narrowed down to about 500 to 600. There's certain, statistical requirements that players have to meet. Obviously, if you're a senior backup quarterback that's never played, I can't watch you. I'm not going to watch you. Some smaller school guys, if I can't get tape on them, even if they're bigger guys, they end up coming off the list because, again, I'm unable to watch them. So there's a lot of ways that it just gets narrowed down. It's a long process that starts in July. And then it's just ongoing throughout the season and, having to keep track at this time of year, who's declaring, who's returning, who's transferring, updating all my scouting lists for that. And it's just, again, it's a long process that takes year round, essentially, especially when you don't have the resources that NFL teams have when it comes to this.
Yeah, it's when you're doing this stuff by yourself. Like for me, last year I watched 275, I think is what I had, and had finalized grades on just shy of 200 players. That's the most I've ever done. And that's like that work alone was ridiculously hard to do. And Erick does this year round. That's like literally what he like prides his whole life and joy on is watching these players. I'm so excited to get into this, and I want to talk about the draft and everything that we have coming up for this Broncos team. How do we fix this? Like this is a stepping point right now for this Broncos team. They're eliminated from the playoffs, essentially. I believe it's like fully mathematically they're eliminated from the playoffs. We've got to figure out what's going on from the top down. The general manager, George Payton, is his job safe? Is head coach Nathaniel Hackett's job safe? What about Russell Wilson? How do you move on from his contract potentially? Is he going to be around here for the long term? And how do you fix this moving forward? Because if everything changes from the top down going into 2023, we're not talking about playoffs for the Broncos next year either. So this right here where we're at is probably the most interesting it's going to get for Broncos fans over the next year for the most part. But before we get into breaking down all that stuff, let's go ahead, Erick.
Well, real quick, I just want to say is Denver is not officially eliminated from the playoffs. They can still make it. They'd have to win out and get a lot of help, but there's only two teams currently eliminated from the playoffs, the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter, though. Like the Broncos winning out in and of itself is just an incredible task. When you've got the Chiefs twice, you're going to get the Chargers again. And as much as everyone likes to talk trash on the Los Angeles Rams right now, you've got those guys. And you also still have the Arizona Cardinals on the docket. Like It doesn't get any easier for this Broncos team. And if they had any hopes of making the playoffs, they needed to win all those games earlier this season, the winnable games, specifically towards the front half of this season. All right, before we get into this, though, guys, we're going to say hello to everybody. Mike S. in the chat. Diamond Rattler just jumped in here. Chronix up in the house. Jay Kozat as well. We got Ample Scramble in the house. Peter Middleton doing his thing out in Cambodia. We got Brad D in the hizzy. Desert Creature. Mark Lindemood. What's going on, everybody? And thank you all for joining us here on Dove Valley Deep Divers. We really do appreciate you guys for joining us here every single Friday. Now, Eric, I don't want to start with George Paton because I think that that's a secondary conversation here. Let's start at the top of the coaching staff, though. With Nathaniel Hackett and the miscues of this season, the failures to adjust, the failures to maximize the players that he does currently have, even with all of the injuries, you still have to be a quality coach to get the most out of your players here. Is there really anything that he can do at this particular point to save his job other than winning out? Like, you have to win out. That's what the conversation starts, is it not?
No, not even winning out. I don't think that saves Nathaniel Hackett. I think that's it for him. I think that he's going to be one and done as a head coach. All the conversations that I do get about the coaching position is talking about what they're going to be looking for in the next guy. Experience on the offensive side of the ball, experienced play caller, either at offensive coordinator or at head coach. They want experience there, somebody with a playbook, somebody that could try and rein in Russ. The big name are those guys that, are going to end up being yes men to Russell Wilson, as they were in Seattle, in Schottenheimer and and Bevel. And it's just, it's just continuing to follow this flaw that you have this year of just letting Russell Wilson have his way. But that's not the conversation. That's a different conversation for a different time. Nathaniel Hackett is gone. He hasn't lost the locker room. I know a lot of people want to talk about the locker room. After every single blowout loss, they want to talk about how he's lost the locker room. He hasn't. Like, the players have bought into what he wants to do. He isn't the issue in the locker room. We've talked about this before. There was that report come out that from, who was it? Jesse Palmer, I think it was, that came out and was talking about how the bigger issue in the locker room is Russell Wilson. There's a lot of truth to that. It's a bit more Russell Wilson than Nathaniel Hackett, but it's not going to be enough to save his job. George Paton's on the hot seat. We've talked about that. Some of the rumors that came out were about George Paton possibly being fired after the season. It sounds like that the new ownership, they want to move on from the head coach, that they've wanted to move on from the head coach for a while. I expect Nathaniel Hackett to get the season, and then come January 9th, there goes Nathaniel Hackett. Will be getting the news that he's fired.
And that's unfortunate. I was super optimistic with Nathaniel Hackett coming in here as the head coach, with the offensive mind that he brings, the energy he brings. It was such a stark contrast with what the Broncos had in Vic Fangio, and even with Vance Joseph. And Vance was a bright and bubbly guy. You just could tell that he was in way over his head. Vic Fangio, it wasn't that he didn't necessarily know what he was doing. Like, I think that there was a lot of high qualities of what he did stabilizing the locker room there. There was also some driving forces that he had in there to destabilize the locker room, especially down the stretch. I mean, look at one Shelby Harris there for a prime example. The treatment of Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater is another prime example. But
no, the treatment of Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, that's all fan created. That didn't actually cause issues in the locker room. Like, I know that there's going to be people in the chat that come into and talk about how Vic Fangio hated Drew Lock. No, he just thought Drew Lock was a bad quarterback. That was the issue. It was fan made. It wasn't issues in the locker room. Like, there were other issues in the locker room with Vic Fangio, whereas the defense essentially mutinied against him. But the quarterback position last year, that had nothing. There's no truth to any of that.
Right. I guess that's a good clarifying point there, and I do apologize for kind of misspeaking. That is more of what I was getting at, was just the conversation surrounding Drew Lock, and there was some fractures in there a little bit for what was going on with that. And you're probably right; it was mostly fan created and stuff like that. Regardless, when you're talking about with what Nathaniel Hackett has and the disaster it's been, you almost need to try to find the most stabilizing resource that you possibly can. And I want to go to a comment here from. It was, dang it, where's it at? Ample Scramble here, saying that everyone was ready to throw Dan Campbell under the bus in Detroit, but he learned on the fly. The one thing that I want to say about Dan Campbell was that he's a guy, much like Dan Quinn, that those players, you can question the coaching acumen of Dan Campbell all you want to. Those players want to die for him. Like the whole bite your kneecaps off. We're going to come back and bite another kneecap off. You're never going to knock us down. That has resonated in that locker room and has turned the culture around. Where the Broncos are at right now, is it wrong of me to assume that somebody like a Dan Campbell, a guy that is that rah, we're going to get everybody to rally around this guy and not just be like the players friendly guy. Like, I'm going to be a disciplinarian like a Dan Campbell or like a Dan Quinn. Is that the proper direction to go in this particular situation?
Well, first off, I just want to say is that nobody really was ready to throw Dan Campbell under the bus. They knew the situation he was going into in Detroit, and they knew that it was going to be a while before they got any results. Jared Goff is what he is. He's a good game managing quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and consistently win you games. Like, so there's a difference there between, a Jared Goff led team and the team where you go out, go big and get Russell Wilson. And granted, Russell Wilson's been playing a crap ton worse than Jared Goff has been, but the expectations of the roster are completely different. Dan Campbell's having to basically completely rebuild that defense. The offensive line has a tremendous amount of investment into it, as does the good portion of the offense in general. But it was still a situation of they had no defense. He had to go in there and he had to build that up. Had to completely change the culture in there as well. And while Denver has a losing culture, it wasn't even close to the same kind of culture and losing culture that they had in Detroit. So not quite the same situation there. And but as for your question, is Denver does need somebody like that. They need one of those guys that he can be player friendly, but not a complete doormat like we have in Nathaniel Hackett. Somebody who's going to step up and be like, and hold the players accountable instead of relying on the players to hold themselves accountable. That doesn't happen often. Like, especially when you get to the NFL, they will point fingers. In a lot of ways, NFL players are like children when it comes to that. It's their fault, not mine. And it's been leaked out into the media, either through, anonymous sources or players coming out and speaking on it directly. They will rather point fingers and look at the mirror or look at themselves in the mirror. And they may say the right things, but their actions speak louder than words. So Denver needs somebody a coach that will come in there. And I know a lot of people get up in arms about, oh, this coach said this about this player. He threw him under the bus. No, he's holding him accountable. He's showing the rest of the locker room that if you mess up, I will get up here. I will mention you by name about how you messed up. It's like the whole thing with Nick Bonito. I did an article about it. Evero came out and made a comment about how he's developing nicely. He's coming along, but he still has everything that he has to work on. And he has to improve all around. Like, that is a great shot across the bow of Nick Bonito. There's a lot of questions about his work ethic and all that coming across. And well, here Evero just said, step up, improve, or else. And so Denver needs that kind of coach in the head coaching position.
So first things first, yes, I am losing my voice to this Facebook user. I've been dealing with the flu for the last 2 weeks. I do apologize for that, guys. And I'm also kind of still having some internet issues on my end here. Eric, you're choppy, but I heard mostly what you said. The one question I have to kind of piggyback off of that is with Nathaniel Hackett obviously on his way out, and Dan Quinn is probably the first name that jumps to mind for a coach that is kind of like that Dan Campbell, the one that's going to hold the players accountable and things like that. Are there any other names in this coaching cycle that could potentially be that kind of a voice for this Broncos team?
Real quick, I want to grab this comment from Diamond Rider, who said, heard today that Peyton only hired Hackett because there's a handshake deal in place for Rodgers to come if Hackett was hired. That's not true. It's completely bogus. I don't know where that started. It's been going around for a while. It's not true. Like, they, through back channels, through, illegal tampering that happens every year by every single team, they knew that either way, Wilson or Rodgers, Hackett was fine. Like, they knew that. It wasn't because there was a handshake deal in place for Rodgers to come. That wasn't true. Like, by the time they hired Hackett, they had a good idea that Rodgers was going back to Green Bay. They just in case, they did that. So, not true. I mean, the bigger reason why they hired him is that basically he was a doormat. He was super player friendly and the complete opposite, and an offensive mind, the complete opposite of what Vic Fangio was. Anyways, as for other head coaches that are like that, Frank Reich is one that comes to mind, and he's one that's getting pretty popular. From what I understand, though, that not so much a head coach, but if they want to go with a defensive coordinator, like, Evero, he's getting a lot of hype out there. Jonathan Gannon, he's another one that I guess he interviewed really well last year. According to some reports, other people that I've spoken with said that his interview wasn't that great, like good, just not great. He's going to be on the coaching list this year again. I would bet my ass on it, really. So he's one of those guys to look at. Frank Reich is to come in and be the offensive coordinator. That veteran play caller I mentioned earlier in the show. And the only way I think they go with a defensive mind or inexperienced head coach is if, Frank Reich is the guy that they're bringing in, not the offensive coordinator. Otherwise than that, I don't expect them to go with a young, up-and-coming, inexperienced offensive mind head coach.
I would really like to see Shane Steichen come in here, just with the work that he was able to do with Jalen Hurts and changing that offense around. After Nick Sirianni gave up play calling and turned it over to Shane Steichen, you saw a more aptitude from that offense to change up what they were doing to really suit what Jalen Hurts does as a player. Yeah. And look at what it's translated to over the last course of the season. I mean, the Eagles right now, they're 10-2. They're leading the NFC. They're like the favorites to go to the Super Bowl and represent the NFC this season. So Shane Steichen is a guy that I really want to see being a guy brought in here. And if they bring in Frank Reich with that as the offensive coordinator, then I think that would be a solid move for the Broncos to do. We got go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
I was going to say, there's one thing I got to point on that, but before we get to that, Gary Palmer came out with the $4.99 donation saying, "Good evening, Lance, Eric, and Scott. Just a little love. Love you, Broncos country." Hey, Gary, it's great to see you here. Thank you for the donation. We appreciate that. Hope you're having a great holiday season. Shane Steichen is one of my favorite coaching candidates. He's in my top 5. I like what he's done as a play caller. I know that some on, not to name names, but others on other Mile High Huddle podcast hosts have mentioned him and questioned about what he does with the offense and everything. Well, he's the play caller. He has been for over a year now. And this offseason, the head coach, Sirianni, has essentially handed the offense completely over to Steichen. Sirianni's still involved, in the game planning, as head coaches are. No matter what side of the ball, offensive-minded head coaches still have his hand in making the defensive game plans, and often they're part of all of it. But it's Shane Steichen's offense, and so that is something to see. But it's just the fact that I would like to see it. He has more experience as an offensive play caller than Nathaniel Hackett does. But again, it comes back to the experience. The same thing with Ben Johnson out of Detroit. He's another one of my guys that I really like. I heard a lot of positive things about him as a head coaching candidate. But it's just everything I've heard coming out of Denver is they want an experienced head coach, somebody who has been a head coach before. And I just go away from them. And then you mentioned Frank Reich as their offensive coordinator. Steichen, Ben Johnson. Yeah, I don't think Frank Reich will be their offensive coordinator. It'll be somebody that they're familiar with, probably on the staff that they're on already. They're out of Philadelphia or Detroit, where the two teams are with right now. And, installing their offense, not we're going to be the head coach and Frank Reich is. And that's a bit of that can be an issue. It works out for some others it doesn't. It's just, kind of how it is. And it's one reason why I prefer a CEO type head coach more than a guy who wants to run his thing on whatever side of the ball.
Right. And I'm right there with you. And that's why my preferred candidate last year was the Dan Quinn type, a guy that could bring in somebody that, would like, here, I'm going to bring in a guy that has the offense and I'm just going to oversee a little bit. And then you've got the defensive coordinator to bring in. And I think that with what the Broncos are doing right now, especially on the defensive side of the football with Ejiro Evero running a lot of cover 1, cover 3 stuff. Dan Quinn's doing some more double high safeties and stuff like that in Dallas this year. But like primarily what Dan Quinn used to do as a defensive coordinator, that same style of defense is what Ejiro Evero is running with the coverage front that the Broncos have right now. So to me, if you can somehow find a way to keep Ejiro Evero, bring in Dan Quinn and let Dan Quinn have his pick of an offensive coordinator, a guy that he's worked with, I know that you're not the biggest Brian Schottenheimer fan, but to me, I mean,
no, he's a yes man to Russell Wilson.
Yes, and that there's a definitely that part of it, and there's going to be some accountability issues there. But the last time we saw Brian Schottenheimer and Russell Wilson working together, Russell Wilson was an MVP candidate. That was 2020. He threw what 40 touchdowns that season. So we see the success there. If it's going to work the way that
you can't call somebody who's never had an MVP vote an MVP candidate. He's never had one.
Well, he should have had an MVP vote that season. And Lamar Jackson doing what he did, rushing for 1,000 yards, throwing for 4,000 yards on top of that. Like there's definitely an argument to have there for sure that Russell Wilson deserved to have an MVP vote for what that team was that season, especially with the offensive line issues they had. But there is something else you also have to take into consideration here with this Broncos team right now, and it's the personnel. And it's not necessarily the offensive line personnel, because I think the Broncos offensive line, even with the injuries that they have right now, is significantly better than what Russell Wilson has had in Seattle for a long time. The thing is, you don't have the same guys. Like you don't have a Tyler Lockett or a DK Metcalf, the guys that can stretch the field, run that deep over in the deep post, the same concepts that you had in Seattle with a Brian Schottenheimer. You don't have those guys in Denver right now. You could try to run KJ Hamler like you run a Tyler Lockett. It's just not going to work. Tyler Lockett was a much more aggressive receiver at the catch point than KJ Hamler has ever been in his entire life. Cortland Sutton is no DK Metcalf. He's not running a 4.38 or whatever the hell DK Metcalf ran with that big body, with that possession receiver skill set that a DK Metcalf has. There's a significant difference with what those guys are. And I think that Broncos country, and myself included, really kind of overestimated what this Broncos receiving core was in terms of comparing them to what the Seattle Seahawks did in up there with Russell Wilson back in 2020 and 2021. It's comparing apples to apples, but also apples to oranges based on the skill sets of the players that the Broncos have right now.
So I'm going to poke a lot of holes in your argument here. It's always been Pete Carroll's offense. We haven't seen Brian Schottenheimer's or Bevel's offense. It's been Pete Carroll's. They've just been in charge of running it. I mean, we saw Bevel in other places, but in Seattle, it was Pete Carroll. Like, it was his offense. They just called the plays. It was, I mean, it's as simple as that. Like, and yeah, I mean, 2020 was a good season for Russ Wilson. I will disagree with you wholeheartedly that he deserved an MVP vote that year. But that's neither here nor there. That's not a big point really of emphasis, but again, it's the whole thing of it's Pete Carroll's offense. These guys are yes men to Russell Wilson. That's why I saw somebody post in the chat that Pete Carroll wanted Schottenheimer fired in Seattle. That isn't accurate. He didn't want him fired. Seattle wanted him fired and moved on. And that is where the contention of Russell Wilson wanting a say in the offensive play caller, that's where that came. It started from Schottenheimer. Didn't want him fired. Well, they fired him anyways. So you're just getting you don't want to enable him by putting people around him. His 2020 season was good, but they were still using him in a way that could be effective for it. Using those rollouts, getting him out in space, covering up for a bad offensive line. And at the time, he was still able to do enough with his legs to it. He doesn't have that anymore. We have watched him fail at rollout plays, and not just because of his legs, but because of his whole body just isn't what it used to be. He's not whipping his head around to get his eyes on that defender. Defenders don't respect his legs anymore, which they had started to lose in that 2020 season. It's where, when he did struggle, that is why. So he's not the same quarterback he was. So you can't put in that same offense and expect him to turn it around. So my whole issue with this is I don't like Brian Schottenheimer as a coach. I don't like Bevel as a coach. I don't think they're good. I think that they got covered up a lot by what Russell Wilson could do when he actually still had, his legs at their max essentially. And, he wasn't as battered as he is now. I mean, taking all those hits, even though he never missed a game until last year, he took a lot of hits, and that adds up on your body. You can't have somebody that's going to sit there and just cave to Russell Wilson and let him do what he wants to do on offense. That's the bigger issue with it. And then you made a comment about Dan Quinn with Evero. If you bring Dan Quinn, Evero's gone. Like, plain and simple. Dan Quinn's he's not gonna keep Evero around, and Evero's not gonna want to stay for him. While they both run a lot of cover 3, cover 1 coverages, their usage up front is completely different, and that's how that changes stuff with how they do with their coverages. It's essentially it's going to lead to a butting of heads there, and one of the two is going to cave. And with what we've seen from Evero, he's not going to be the one to cave, and neither is Dan Quinn. So I would rather see them go with a different defensive mind, one that has a little bit more similarities to what Evero wants to do if they want to keep Evero, or just make Evero the head coach in this instance and go that way. If you want to keep Evero around, if you don't, then go get Dan Quinn. Go get that veteran guy that players respect, that he's going to hold players accountable, that you're going to get it. But the issue with Quinn is that offensive coordinator. So all the options Denver has at coach is going to be problematic because the quarterback situation is problematic. I know that there's a lot of talk about potentially, post June 1st cutting him this year, and that's going to be extremely rough to do. You're splitting up, what is it, $107 million over 2 years? Like, it's rough to do. It's rough to move on from him. I think post June 1st in 2024 is it. I would just, I don't know where you go to fix it when it comes to the coaching situation, because they're going to sit there. My fear is George Paton, in an attempt to save his job, is going to go all out on building everything around Russell Wilson, only to be let down by Russell Wilson once again.
So what's your first step? If you had a 5-step plan
I run it back. I run it back in 2023. I don't care if it's a tough sell to fans. I run it back. And then in 2024, you start fresh. New general manager, new head coach, new quarterback. You are starting completely over. That is what I would do. I think it's better for the short term, because then if Russell Wilson fails, well, congratulations. You played yourself into freaking Caleb Williams, most likely. Yeah. Like, you can sit here in 2024, a lot of big contracts come off, so you can go out there and you can refresh. By running it back, you can franchise tag Draymond Jones for the year. Not going to make him super happy, but congratulations, you bought yourself another year to where you can give him that big extension and see if he is able to play more consistent throughout the season to earn that big contract completely. So I know it's not going to happen, but running it back is, from every way I look at this, running it back is the best option for the short term and the long term.
I tend to agree with you on that. And the reason why I say that is everything you pretty much just said. Looking forward to 2024, when you finally have draft capital back in your pocket and you're looking at being able to actually rebuild with what you have right now with Russell Wilson, the cap hit and everything like that. It's hard to move on from him right now. It's so hard to do that unless you're willing to eat $107 million over the next 2 seasons, which, I mean, hey, there's some plus minus to that as well. You can move on from guys like Ronald Darby, get Garrett Bowles to restructure, Justin Simmons to restructure, Tim Patrick. You can move on from him. Like, there's a way you could work around that salary cap hit and try to start that rebuild following the 2023 season.
Oh, yeah, it's easy. Get rid of Ronald Darby, get rid of Graham Glasgow, move on from Garrett Bowles, potentially look at trading Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick, like Jerry Jeudy. Like, basically, is if you want to do it now in 2023, there are so many moves you can make to, eat the dead cap hit, and it's going to suck because it's going to set you back 2 years.
Yep.
But go out there, roll out Brett Rippon for a season. Like, play for that high pick in 2024 then, if you're going to rebuild. And it's just that my frustration with this whole situation is there's obvious ways that Denver can get out of this, but they're not going to take it because of what they gave up for Russell Wilson. They don't want to give up on it after a year.
Yeah.
And they can. Like, yes, it's a big cap hit, but there are other veterans that you can move on from. Ronald Darby's has only played 1 full season. He got that big 3-year, $30 million contract from George Paton for it.
Yep.
Like, move on from him. Just blow it up and start over either this year and, then go get a new general manager, go get a new coach, go get a new quarterback, or roll it back with Brett Rippon, or do it in 2024. Whatever it is, the best option for the long-term of situation of this team is you get everyone on the same timeline. Because when you have a general manager in place, a lot of these young coaches who want to bring a guy they're comfortable with in the front office, well, you can't do that anymore. That's why Brian Dabble rolled out the Broncos right away. He wanted to bring the guy from the Bills with him, which is why he ended up with the Giants.
Yep.
Like that's what you have to do is you have to have them on the same timeline, and more that's been a trend that the NFL has been heading towards, and it's a good trend to have, because then you got to need your coach and your front office. They need to work in unison together, and if they're both failing, or if one fails, it's going to be hard to cover up for the other one, for the most part. And it also gets the quarterback on the same timeline as well.
Yeah. Joseph Linares jumping in here with a $5 super chat saying, Luke, I'm sorry if I missed it, but do you have a response to Benjamin Albright? So this is Dove Valley Deep Divers. That show was on Wednesday night, and he did address that. So make sure you go to Mile High Huddle's YouTube page. Go check that out. I'm not sure exactly what your comment with Benjamin Albright is, so come back in the chat and maybe I'll have a response for you on that one. But we do apologize. And thank you, Joseph, for joining us tonight. We do appreciate that. And thank you for the donation. And we do appreciate you for that as well. The one thing that you have to kind of take into consideration if you're going to try to blow everything up is, what does the locker room do? Like, you're talking about moving on.
Who cares?
Like, but who
cares what the locker room's going to do at this point?
Well, there is a point to this though, Eric, and I hope you let me express it here really fast. You're talking about moving on from the natural leaders, the Cortland Suttons, Tim Patricks, the Glasgow, Garrett Bowles, Justin Simmons, like all of those big time guys that you have right now, the big time leaders in the locker room. You're moving on from those guys. You don't have Draymond Jones under contract right now, so you got to figure that one out. Does he actually resign? Pat Surtain, he's only going to get older, and is he going to resign with this team? Damari Mathis, by the time that it comes around to where he's going to have to resign, you're still looking at a rebuild with Caleb Williams in 2025. Is Damari Mathis going to stick around? Quinn Miners, you've got Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, if they're not already gone. Like, you're talking about completely restructuring this roster all the way from the top down with nothing to build it with. You got 5 draft picks in 2023. That's it. You have no capital. You're not going to have any money to rebuild this thing. You're barely even going to be able to fill the roster at that particular point. Now, I'm going extreme here, and I understand that. And I want to bring out both sides of this, because I heard this conversation earlier today. There's Benjamin Albright, Ryan Edwards, and Zach Seegers were talking about this exact same thing. And Eric and you and actually Zach were on the same page here. Just blow it up and start over right now. Like, why the hell not? There's a way out. You can do it. It's going to suck for 2 years. But what after that 2 years? If you don't have a roster to build, where are you going to start? Is it like you're going to start off with a brand new franchise, starting over from zero with Caleb Williams, and that's it? There's nothing around it. It's a bare bones, bare studs, nothing here. You're talking about, if this actually happens, if they clear out the losing culture, as Paul jumps in here, clear out the losing culture, get everyone out of here, start off with the studs. If you take Caleb Williams in 2024, there's nothing to build with him, and then you're moving on from him anyways. Like, there's so many different ways to attack this. And I agree. I think that this is probably the best situation, is if they do that. I think that's a great idea. But there is the other side of this conversation that we need to address here.
I mean, except that you don't have to clear out everybody in the locker room. You don't have to completely tear everything down. And even if you do, so what? So what? Justin Simmons is a good safety.
Mm-hmm.
He's not great.
Top 7, maybe. Top 7, maybe. Let's be honest here. Top 7 in the NFL, maybe.
Yeah, he's a good safety. He's not great. And I know a lot of people are going to point to his 2-interception game. That's great. I mean, he has those games every now and then, but those are mixed in with a lot of bad games. So what? Patrick Surtain, guess what? This is the second year of his deal. You have 3 more years of cost control for him, and then you have 2 more with the franchise tag. Draymond Jones, you mentioned him about how he's not under contract. Franchise tag him. Use that. You don't care about the locker room because the locker room is so used to losing. You cut that out, and you start over. Mm-hmm. And these guys who are in here, Cortland Sutton, how many times have we seen him quit on the team this year? Quit on the offense, give minimal effort. Like, there were 3 or 4 weeks in a row that on Friday nights, I was sitting here ranting about how Cortland Sutton wasn't giving it. Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, who cares? They can't stay on the field. Yes, they were a former 1st and 2nd round pick. KJ Hamler was Vic Fangio's dude. Nobody could defend a guard that small and that fast. That was the reasoning why Denver drafted KG Hamler. He's played it. He'll have missed what? Out of 60 games or something like that, he'll have played 23 because he's not expected back this season now, according to in a statement that with the wording in a statement he made, he's not expecting to come back with a hamstring injury. He got sidelined last year for a hamstring, or as a rookie for a hamstring injury for 8 weeks. Like Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, okay. Tim Patrick, yes, Denver misses him this year. Does he change? Does he flip the record that much? Does he change the Broncos record this much? I say no. one or two win difference at max, and that's not even guaranteeing because the issues we have with Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. So I understand that cutting Russell Wilson when he has a small cap hit. I think it's like $22 million, or I know Scott posted in the private chat for a $107 million cap hit. But the issue is that the following year, if you don't cut him, I think by the 5th day of the new league year, then you're guaranteeing his 2025 contract, which makes him a lot harder to cut from then after that until after the 2025 season. Yep. So it's a year of buying 2 years. So you eat it this year. You have your crappy season to go all in when you get all that draft capital back to build around Caleb Williams, when you get all this money back. Because guess what? With just a handful of cuts, Garrett Bowles, Ronald Darby, Graham Glasgow, and one other one. Oh, and just those ones. Garrett Bowles, Ronald Darby, Graham Glasgow, and of course, Russell Wilson. Denver can have over $30 million on the salary cap next year in this offseason.
Yep. That's
not handicapping your team. That's not giving it to where you don't have money to go over it or to improve this roster. So the arguments that you made to stick with Russell Wilson, well, there's some valid points there. You don't have to completely demolish the locker room, but you do need to. You need to attack the locker room because you need to attack the mentality that's in that locker room and the comfortness that they have with losing. Justin Simmons takes the mic and he talks about losing and how much it hurts. I don't feel it. I don't feel like this is just my opinion here with how it went with I listen to him. I don't feel like he really actually cares about it. So blow it up, start over, start fresh, rebuild the locker room. If it takes 2-3 years, so what? Because if you don't move on within the next 2 years from Russell Wilson and you don't start doing this process anyways, then you're just prolonging it.
Let me be clear here, Eric. I'm 100% in agreement with you because I think that this needs to be blown up 100%. Like I'm all the way here for this. And also, I mean, excuse me, guys. I do apologize. The big thing here is you're also going to be able to move on from some of those contracts via trade. Like you're gonna take some dead money hit, and you're gonna have to move on from some of these players. Garrett Bowles is a left tackle, is a quality left tackle in the NFL. He's worth something. Justin Simmons, another player, probably worth something. Cortland Sutton, another quality player, probably worth something. You're going to get Tim Patrick in there, probably worth something. You're going to be able to move on from a lot of these guys. Graham Glasgow, if you'll be lucky to get a 6th-round pick for the guy. You're using that to get rid of some money spaces. Is really what that's coming down to. Like, real quick, I don't disagree with you on that. So let me just be clear here.
Yeah.
I feel like there is a need to have some leadership in this room that has to be there now. And maybe, like you said, getting those bad voices out. And I'm not really, I don't want to say that, bad voices. The stagnant voices are probably the best way to say that. Von Miller is the prime example here. Von Miller being moved on from last year, a stagnant voice in the locker room, and the Broncos got something out of it, helped them get Russell Wilson. You get rid of those players like that, it's going to help the culture of this team. And I'm firmly behind you with this. I believe that is the proper way. Moving from Russell Wilson right now is the way to go.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to grab this. Chronic says you can't dump Wilson this year, $77 million salary cap hit. You have to release a lot of players to get under the cap. No, you won't. Post-June first cut, you only have to cut Garrett Bowles, Ronald Darby, and Graham Glasgow, and you're good. And you're actually significantly in the positives for it. So no, you don't have to release a lot of players for it with a post-June first cap hit.
This
and cutting Patrick and yes,
this one too. Brandon McManus needs to go. I'm sorry, I love me some Brandon McManus. He's the longest tenured player on this team, the last remaining member of the Super Bowl 50 team. He needs to go. I firmly believe this. I think Brandon McManus, for what he is as a person, probably a decent guy off the field. What he is in this locker room is a freaking cancer. He wants way more responsibility for this team. He wants to have a lot of opportunities, and he never pulls through in the clutch. He's declining as a kicker, and he's overpriced. Sorry, Brandon. Love you, dude. You're awesome. Please leave this locker room because I believe you're a cancer in there. That's a hot take, and I hope that people like shred me for it. Go ahead. That's a hot take. I'm sorry. I'm done with him. Done.
I'll come back to Brandon McManus here in a second. John Clover says, real Chief fan in the house checking this week's competition. Why? Denver's bad. Like, you don't need to check on us. You guys, the Chiefs should run away with this one pretty easily. Like the Broncos pass coverage has been not so good. I mean, statistically they're fine, but you know, the advanced metrics and everything are terrible ever since they traded away Bradley Chubb. They get no pressure and it's hurting players in the secondary, and the players in the secondary aren't holding up. The Chiefs should run away with this one. I know I picked Denver to win this one, as you know, the Chiefs could potentially overlook it, but guess what? I'm picking Denver every game this season. So next week I'll be picking Denver, and the week after, and so on and so forth. Anyways, as for Brandon McManus, the issue with him, and I don't think it's such a hot take to say that he should be gone. And the fact that I wouldn't say he'd call him a cancer in the locker room, but he definitely doesn't help. He is a guy who last year threw a fit because Vic Fangio told him no to trying to go kick like a 70-yard field goal or whatever it was. And then he turns around and, you know, Doormat Hackett comes in at week 1 and they're playing for a 64-yard game-winning field goal by Brandon McManus, or 68, whatever it was, yard field goal by Brandon McManus, and he fails. And it's happened consistently. He's not reliable beyond the 50, and he wants to constantly go try these guys. I'm sure Brandon McManus is a great dude. I'm sure he's super nice, but Brandon McManus, the football player, seems more about making himself look good. And it's time that Denver, I mean, they got to rebuild their whole special teams unit, starting with the coordinator. Special teams doesn't get enough hate because they are bad. They are the worst special teams unit in the NFL this year, by far. Their punter sucks. He's had 3.5 good games, I'd say, this season. Montreal Washington looks like still early. Not going to call him a for sure bust right now, but he doesn't look like, you know, as advertised as that 5th round pick. Maybe he can develop. Whatever the case is, Dwayne Stukes absolutely advocated for him. It was Dwayne Stukes' guy, and he sucks. He doesn't have any clue of when to return it, when to let it go. And yes, there's been some bad luck on his part with the bounce of the ball. Not arguing that. But when you take those away, he's still terrible. The coverage units are terrible. The kickoff unit is, the kick return unit is terrible. Like, it's just absolutely garbage of a unit. Dwayne Stukes, talking about coaches, that's where he has to go. Like, he has to go. So just, again, you know, rebuilding the whole locker room, rebuild special teams unit as well.
Yeah. I want to grab this comment here from Taurus because I've seen it a couple times here. Baker Mayfield shows you how important the system is. He was playing like garbage in Carolina all year. Then 2 days in a good system, he played way better than over half a year in a trash system. I don't want to call you out here. I'm going to a little bit here. But you also bring in something that I do want to like point to a bigger issue here with the Denver Broncos. Like you said, Baker Mayfield was in a system for 2 days. He was in the team's locker room for 2 days. He doesn't even know the offense. There's no chance he knows the offense, not top to bottom. He goes out there and orchestrates a 98-yard touchdown drive to win the freaking game. Russell Wilson hasn't been in the goddamn end zone in 3 weeks, guys. Seriously, he has not scored a touchdown in 3 weeks. It's been bad. It's been awful. And it's so frustrating because this whole offense was built around Russell Wilson. It's his passing offense, guys. He's the one that orchestrated it. Him and Nathaniel Hackett combined together to create this passing offense. Tim Patrick called it a 1 and a 1 back in training camp. Said it's the first time he's ever heard this verbiage. First time anyone. This is his offense. And he cannot figure out a way to incorporate it and use it the correct way. He cannot figure out how to read a defense. He cannot figure out how to play correctly on the field. Baker Mayfield went from Matt Rule, who was fired, got benched, transferred over to the Los Angeles Rams, and played in a game and won. And played well, mind you. He actually played fairly well. It's so bad. So bad. It's embarrassing. It's flat out embarrassing to like, especially for me. I was the guy pounding for Russell Wilson. Like I pounded the table over. I was like, I don't want Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to draft. Give me Russell Wilson. Let's go. Let's have this. Let's have some fun here. And you're getting this right now. A guy that scored 9 points, 3 of them were gifted to him by the defense. They got 8 yards. Justin Simmons intercepted the ball on the 40-yard line, and the Broncos got to the 32-yard line, including a negative 3-yard running play on that particular drive, and they kicked a field goal. They scored 9 points against the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, that's a great defense. You have got to be kidding me with the way that this quarterback's playing right now. I don't even want to say his name. I'm done with Russell Wilson. I'm over it. Sorry. I'm fired up right now.
To be fair, first of all, who cares about Baker Mayfield? Like, he's on the Rams, he's with the Panthers, he's with the Browns. Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't pertain to the Broncos in any way, shape, or form. But in to add some context to it, the offense that he's playing in the Rams is quite similar to the offense Kevin Stefanski runs with the Browns. A lot of the same concepts. Verbiage is a little bit different. To be fair, it's something that he's used to, something that he's worked with before. Yeah. Like, so even though he doesn't know the verbiage, he still has a basic understanding of the concepts of it. And then real quick, I want to grab this comment from here. From I'm the Man, a couple of them. He says, this is not Russell's offense, it's Hackett's. And says, and Hackett thought Russ could do what Aaron Rodgers can. No, this is Russell. 90% of this offense, the passing offense, is Russell Wilson. It's concepts that he designed, that he brought in, that because when he was with the Seattle Seahawks, he wanted a large say over what the offense does. And every time that they would do that, the Seattle Seahawks would suck. They'd rein him in and go back to doing Pete Carroll's offense. And now we're seeing almost the exact same concepts. I've studied the 2021 and 2020 playbooks of the Seattle Seahawks and the Green Bay Packers. There is far more Seahawks stuff in here, concepts of it, than Packers. The running game is more Packers, is more Hackett's offense. But the passing game, 90% of that is Russell Wilson. It's Russell Wilson wanting to be a pocket passing quarterback. He doesn't want to move out because he knows that his legs are essentially shot. He doesn't want to cut the field in half because he wants to be a pocket passing quarterback. He wants to sit in the pocket, scan the field, and be a Peyton Manning. That is what he wants. That is well known. Seahawks media, Seahawks analysts, they have talked about it for years, 3-4 years. Broncos media, after he was traded to it, in his opening press conference, he made reference to Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and being a pocket passing quarterback. In an interview, I believe it was last offseason, with the radio station, he made a comment along the lines about how to prolong your career, you have to be a pocket passing quarterback. He can't do it. We have seen him consistently fail on obvious reads pre-snap of zone or man consistently. There were concerns coming out of Seattle for years about his ability to properly read a defense, which is why they would do so much of cutting the field in half. Even when they didn't move him out of the pocket, it was often a simple high-low read. You're reading one defender, and then you're making the decision, are you going deep or are you taking the short guy? Guess what? When Denver does that, they've been successful. That is what helped lead them to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Those 3 drives, if you go back and watch them, a good portion of the passing plays out of that were those high-low reads. That whole thing there was like those 3 big plays to Greg Dulcich. It was a high-low read the whole time with Greg Dulcich and KJ Hamler. It's Russell Wilson's offense. It's not Hackett's. Yeah. Very, very little bit about this. And of course, there's been other things coming out when it comes to audibles and, issues with the play calls, issues with the scripts and everything like that fall on Russell Wilson. And this is by no means a defense of Gary Kubiak as a play caller or Nathaniel Hackett as a play caller or Nathaniel Hackett as a scheme. But to say that it is Nathaniel Hackett's offense is just completely false. It's not. It's more Russell Wilson's.
Yeah. Paul jumping in here off the top rope with authority here. $50 super chat. Thank you, Paul. Saying, great pod, my friends. Feel better fast, Lance. I'm hoping to, man. It's been 2 weeks and this cough is just not going away. But thank you so much, man. We appreciate all the support. Been fun to read some of your comments in here as well. And we just appreciate everything you do for us here on DVDD. It's always nice to have the Boo Iowa in there to take a shot at Scott's morning co-host here, Nick Kendall. So it's always great to have that fun going on in here as well. We got another super chat here. Where did that go? Scott, do you have that by chance? There it is. BK jumping in here. $5 super. We appreciate that, BK. Great discussions today, everyone. And thank you, BK. A great discussion. It's always a great discussion here on Dove Valley Deep Divers. A couple more things I want to kind of grab here.
Real quick, since conversations about it, I want to grab this real quick. Let me go back up. And Peter says Denver ownership will get us Sean Payton. No, Sean Payton has to want to come here.
Nope.
Like, that's the thing. And everything coming out of, the NFL and everything is, if the Dallas Cowboys move on from McCarthy, Sean Payton's their guy. And it's expected that the Chargers fire Brandon Staley, and Sean Payton really wants to work with Justin Herbert. Sean Payton has made some comments that look unfavorable for him wanting to come to Denver and primarily working with the quarterback. Now, could it happen if Denver decides, hey, we're going to just move on from Russell Wilson? Maybe, but I doubt it. I think this is a bad year to want to be in on Sean Payton. If it was 2024 and they were for sure getting rid of Russell Wilson and they had a high pick to go and, try and get Caleb Williams or one of the other, Drake May, or one of the other quarterbacks that's projected at being, top 5 picks, because there's like 4 of them for 2024 at this moment, then maybe. But forcing him to work with Russell Wilson, it's a no-go.
Yeah. Mark Knapp jumping in here. Thanks, Mark, for joining us. We appreciate it, man. Do we want to look at his own office or his own trainers and quarterbacks coach? And thank you, Mark, for the stars donation on that. Yes and no. Luke Patterson had an interesting opinion article about Jake Heaps earlier this week. I don't think that's a huge deal, but there's something to take into consideration on that with not equal treatment of players. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to get hot take about it, but there's some discourse in the locker room on that one. I will be rest assured on that one. I want to go back to something you said about Sean Payton. And with him coming here in 2024, it's not only getting rid of Russell Wilson, it's getting rid of George Payton, because Sean Payton's going to want his own person. He's going to want his own general manager. And if not his own general manager, he's going to want to be in charge of the personnel there as well. So that, to me, is a big no-go here. Because if you look at the situations that are going to be up and available for him this year, the Dallas Cowboys is obviously the front runner for him. It has been for a long time. Jerry Jones probably not going to give up all of the personnel decisions, but for Sean Payton, I think he's going to do that. He would allow Sean Payton to have at least a voice in the room. And then for the Chargers, Tom Telesco is not on a very good footing right now, given his coaching hires over the last, 3 different cycles he's been a part of this team. His drafts also haven't been great, except for these last couple of years. Yeah, he hit on Justin Herbert. That was one of the easiest evaluations you could ever hit, though. Justin Herbert, was a number 1 overall pick. I'm also not Tom Telesco, but whatever. Tom Telesco is definitely on the hot seat there, as well as Brandon Staley is. So if you can reset the entire organization there, I would rather see Sean Payton go to a team like the Chargers right now, where they have a quality young quarterback that he can build around and is going to have the personnel decision making that he needs to have in terms of creating the roster in the way that he wants it to. So the Broncos getting Sean Payton this season, not going to happen. Eric, I'm totally with you. 2024, 2025, when they reset everything, sure. I mean, Sean Payton would be a great hire. By that point, I think you're going to get a better chance at Mike Tomlin. And if Mike Tomlin's let go from the Steelers this year, I'm all about that one too. There's your CEO type. Let him come in and right the ship here, especially with Russell Wilson, because Mike Tomlin will tell him to shut the hell up.
Gary Palmer comes in with a $10 donation saying, I love the Passion Guys. You are killing it. Thanks again, Gary. We appreciate you. You're always a great supporter of all the podcasts, and we can't tell you enough how much we support it. One thing I want to go back on that was touched on was the whole thing about Jake Heaps. And just real quick, this will be the only thing I say on it. A college NFL coach reached out to me afterwards after he was made aware of this, and he said, and this is his response to me: oh my God, how is this a story? You're blaming a season on a guy who sits quietly in the back of the room. Effing hell. That is the response for it, and that's the right response for it. I know I've talked about how Jake Heaps at times here. The impact that he's had, I was, a little off on. He's doing his job. Like, Russ is his boss. He's doing what Russ tells him. Yes, he is allowed at the team facilities. Every quarterback in the NFL has a private coach that is allowed at facilities. Quincy Avery, Aaron Rod, with Deshaun Watson there in Houston. I still think he's allowed around with the Browns now. Aaron Rodgers, even Peyton Manning, multiple years had his own personal coach run it. It happens. Like, it's not that big of a deal. There are much other bigger issues with it. I think the whole offense thing is a little overblown as well. But there's plenty of issues with this team to talk about. That the personal coach, the personal quarterback coach that's employed by the quarterback, that's not one. Like, it's there's other issues. Like, so, well, moving on from that and the whole thing. So I saw somebody make a comment about Sean Payton's offense with Russell Wilson and if Russell Wilson can run it. But first, before I get to that, Kobe comes in and says, "Love the pod. Let's blow it up, please." Thank you, Kobe. We appreciate that. And yeah, definitely. Thanks, let's blow it up. So
can I just real quickly here, because I want to go back to a point that you made about Russell Wilson wanting to be like Peyton Manning, like Tom Brady, like Drew Brees. And I know this is probably where you're going to go with your Sean Payton offense with Russell Wilson and everything. Part of the problem with Russell Wilson is he doesn't like to target the middle of the field. And those quarterbacks, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, they owned the middle of the field. That's what elite quarterbacks do. Like, if you're an elite quarterback, you destroy the middle of the field and you take your shots when you need to. Russell Wilson doesn't target the middle of the field. And it has been a problem this season with the Broncos offense. The crossing routes, the deep mesh route, the mesh routes, the deep overs, the stuff that Russell Wilson actually should be hitting as an elite level quarterback. He's not throwing to that area of the field. And that's a problem. And if you want to run Sean Payton's offense, you have to target the middle of the field, plain and simple.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I was going to say is Russell Wilson can run it if he is able to see over the grass to target the middle of the field. That's the issue, is the middle of the field. Scott pulled up his comment that he had about if Jameis can run it, Wilson can. And not wrong. I mean, the complexity of it is a little overstated, but it's about the willingness of wanting to attack the middle of the field. And then, using that to work outwards and deep. And Russell Wilson, he lied to everybody in Broncos country talking about wanting to work the middle of the field this offseason multiple times. And, well, here we are. His heat maps are very left and right oriented and, often huge gaps in the middle. But that's beside the point. The bigger issue for me with wanting to run Sean Payton's offense is that his placement. It is an offense that really thrives on, consistently properly placed passes and timing, which is why Drew Brees, even as his arm started to get shot there a few years ago, he was still able to be somewhat effective until he just completely, lost all ability to throw the ball, basically. Because it was timing and placement, and that is something that Russell Wilson has consistently struggled with. Even on these, quick hits that we're seeing early games on the scripts from Russell Wilson and this Broncos offense, is the placement is consistently bad. I saw one that a lot of people are, ripping Cortland Sutton for dropping it, but I mean, the ball was literally about 3 feet or about 2 feet behind him. And he's sitting there trying to reach back for it and having to turn and adjust his body and everything. Like, there's so many issues with it that Russell Wilson can run it. Would he be effective at running it? No, I don't think it would be effective. I don't think that's I don't think there's any offense that can really make Russell Wilson effective at this point. Watching him play, watching the mistakes, and this isn't to say that there aren't other issues with this Broncos offense. The offensive line's bad. There's no running game. The receivers are inconsistent at best. There's so many issues with this offense. But when I watch Russell Wilson and I focus in on him and the issues that he has with the timing plays of how long he wants to hold on to the ball, which again, that really hurts the timing of it. And he wants to, the placement, the lack of the middle field, the issues to his legs, just so many issues with him. I don't know what kind of offense that you can run him in and have him be effective. You can't roll him out. I know a few weeks ago I really hyped up, do more play action rollouts, do more bootlegs. You can't. Defenses don't respect his running ability enough to stay disciplined on the backside, and he doesn't have the legs to keep that space there from that backside defender in the first place. He doesn't have the timing down enough to flip his head around and get the ball out before the defender hits him. So you can't do that for him. Quick hits, he doesn't have the placement for it, and he still wants to hold the ball a little too long. There's just so many issues. So I'll pass it over to you, but I don't see what offense there is to put Russell Wilson in to get him to be any better.
The offense that you have to run with him is something he's not willing to do. And I don't think that there's something that he's capable of doing. And that's using his legs. Like quite honestly, you have to get him on the move and let him create.
You can't.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I know, don't yell at me. Like, damn it. There's somebody in here saying platform shoes for Russell Wilson. That would help. 7'5" receivers. For
Have him
Russell
play in
Wilson
high heel cleats.
There you go.
You know, like the 6-inch stilettos. There we go. Merry Christmas, Russ. Anyways, we're at an hour. We probably should get out of here. We're getting yelled at by Scott in the back now.
I'm surprised my voice lasted this long. Thank you all for joining us here on Dove Valley Deep Divers. I'm sorry for getting so heated, and I hope that everybody enjoyed it. But thank you all for joining us nonetheless. We appreciate everybody for joining us here. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter. Find me at Sanderson MHH, for Erick at Erick Trickel. John Freeman, if you're still in the chat, please hit us up on Twitter. If you got a Twitter account, hit us up. If not, I'll check the Facebook, the YouTube comments. I want to talk with you. Let's have some fun here. I believe that's your name, John Freeman, the Chiefs fan that jumped in here. Regardless, follow us on Twitter, guys. Make sure you guys are following at Mile High Huddle, also at Scout Kennedy. That's our great producer Scott behind the scenes running the 1s and 2s. Folks, while you're at it, if you're financially able to do so, huddleuppod.com. It's a great place to get yourself a hat, a t-shirt, anything to support Mile High Huddle. We appreciate that. It's a great way to support the show and help us spread us out and whatnot. If you guys aren't financially able to do so, 3 things everybody should be doing at the bottom of your screen here. Like I say every single week, subscribe to Mile High Huddle on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you guys get your podcast content. Subscribe to Mile High Huddle. Like every video and article you guys see on social media. And if you love it, please share it. It helps us out the most because you get us in front of as many Broncos fans as possible. We can do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. Now, with that, guys, I'm just going to say goodbye on this one. Erick, if you got anything else, that I'll let you go on it. But I'm going to say my thing. You all stay safe and take care. Have a great rest of your weekend. And if not, guys, you all we'll see you guys same time, same place next week. That it? You good?
Oh, there's a lot that I could talk about, but I mean, it would go on for another hour. So everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe and, have a good one.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.